everyone, and welcome to this episode of On the Block with Mem and Pete. We really appreciate you being here. Today's a very special episode since we have a guest on. He doesn't say his real name. He's one of the biggest influencers on Instagram. You might actually have heard of him. It's CryptoHumor. We do get to see his face, which is a treat in itself because he's never shared his face before. We talk about many things, one of them being Bitcoin maximalism, CryptoHumor's all beef diet and why he always just eats beef. We get into the idea of currencies and how they play a role in society and how Bitcoin can help change it. This was our first time doing an interview, so bear with us as we work out through the kinks. But yeah, that's about it. Stick around for the show. First off, do you want to tell us your name, or what's your name?
They call me CH.
CH for CryptoHumor. All right. Well, you know what?
That's right. That's right.
We even get to see your face, so we won't dive too deep into it.
So we on Instagram, we've known each other for a while now. We're in the same DM group together in the Satoshi Droppers. Shout out to the Satoshi Droppers. How long have you been on Instagram?
I've been on since, I think, May of 2017.
Cool. So we're going to put all your links in the description so people can join. But if you don't know and you don't follow, CryptoHumor on Instagram, he's the man.
How many followers do you have now? Over 35K?
I think so, yeah. Just past 35,000 a couple weeks ago, I think.
Yeah, the crazy thing is I see people using your pictures all the time. Does it bother you when they don't give you credit?
You know, at first, at the beginning, I used to get mad because you wanna have your stuff out there, but a lot of people will they'll actually DM me now and say, hey, do you mind if I repost your stuff? I'll throw you a tag and stuff like that. So at this point, it doesn't really matter anymore.
All right, sweet. You know what? We want to start off with something very serious, and it's actually something I asked you about in a DM myself. I slid into your DMs to ask this question. You're on an all meat diet, and I've been a vegetarian myself for the past 2 years. I mean, I eat meat here and there, but mainly I've been a vegetarian. Tell us about that a little bit. I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's funny when you fall down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you get to experience a lot of other red pill type moments in your life, and one rabbit hole kind of leads to the next. If you ever follow, Michael Goldstein or Safety and a Moose, both of those guys are carnivores, and that's sort of where I had gotten the idea from in the first place. And then I found Dr. Sean Baker on Instagram and Twitter. He's awesome. He's been carnivore for 2 years now. And he has an awesome website called meatheals.com. It's awesome. You can go through and it shows lists of just people who've been suffering from autoimmune conditions, from gastritis, diabetes, overweight, rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, you name it. A lot of these people have been suffering for many years, and they've gone on this all meat diet and have seen dramatic results. And, I had stomach problems in the past, and I was like, you know what, at this point, let me just try it. What's the worst that can happen? 2 weeks, I'll either love it or I'll hate it. And within the first 2 weeks, I had 0 stomach pains, and I used to get stomach pains like every single day. So after that, I was like, all right, I guess I'm just going to eat meat. And then after a couple months of not dying, not losing a ton of body fat, and feeling super strong, I had a shoulder injury my whole life, and that completely went away, all the pain that I used to have. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to eat meat. That's going to be it. And it's made my life super simple, and it makes for good content on Instagram. So I can't really fault it for anything else.
That's interesting, man. What's your favorite type of meat?
My favorite is ribeye for sure.
Yeah, I love a bit of ribeye myself.
Have you ever had Kobe?
Yep. Yeah, I have had Kobe beef. I still need to try the Wagyu beef, I think it's called.
Yeah.
it's like $100 a pound, super expensive, but it looks pretty good.
Amazing. So
Maybe once, you know.
do you eat any
Go
vegetables?
ahead. Occasionally, not very often. I used to. I actually, it's funny because before I started eating only meat, I was doing a vegan and gluten-free diet for maybe 6 months or so, because I wanted to see if that would help my stomach issues also. So I've kind of gone through and tested a lot of different diets over the last couple of years, and after I liked vegan carnivore, it wasn't bad. It's pretty much just vegan gluten free. It's pretty much just vegetables, like that's it, which was fine. I didn't mind it at all. It was a lot more effort for sure, and cooking was a hassle. But after that, I said, all right, you know, let me try the exact opposite. And it turns out that I loved the exact opposite, which is only eating pretty much red meat, bacon, and eggs. And it's
Amazing.
yeah, I don't think I'm gonna go back.
So you mentioned going down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin that led you to be, how did you first go down the rabbit hole? Give us the backstory. I always love hearing the backstory of how people got involved in crypto.
Yeah, how did you get into Bitcoin? So I actually got into Ethereum first. I had a buddy of mine at work who was you know, his friends had gotten into ETH, you know, I guess in early 2017. They were really talking about it. A lot of them got in pretty early, and you know, my buddy was really on me, like, hey man, you got it, this crypto stuff's really interesting. You got it, my friends are making money, like I think this might be a good investment opportunity, blah blah blah. So I was like, all right, you know, let me so I bought a couple ETH on Coinbase, as everybody does, and then I said, well, let me start doing some more research on this. I kind of bought it on a whim just to get in the game. And you know, I started watching some of the documentaries that were on Netflix or Amazon Prime, and they were much more Bitcoin focused. And after watching, you know, 2 or 3 of them, it started to really make sense. I was like, okay, interesting. Like I really think this this could work. This is game changing technology. And I was, you know, very interested in a ton of coins after that, you know, jumping down the rabbit hole with this, reading that white paper, you know, everything's going to the moon. We're going to have a different token for riding scooters and Uber and, you know, all this other stuff. And you think you're going to get rich overnight. It's fun. Shit coins, they are very fun. That's for sure. And, you know, once I started reading some counter arguments, you know, mainly from the Bitcoin side, and they were really encouraging to do more research into Austrian economics, you know, the history of money. I started reading Nick Szabo and all these things that I wish I would have read, you know, a decade ago, but I guess it's never too late. And that's when I kind of started leading, okay, now I got to go full steam ahead on just Bitcoin. And that's pretty much the origin story.
Cool. So you'd consider yourself a Bitcoin maximalist?
For sure, yeah, for sure. Converted. I definitely think you don't always. I think it comes down to who introduces you to crypto and what they were holding at the time, because I think that's really influential on, you know, what you think is going to be the next Bitcoin or the next big coin to go to the moon. You know, it's really easy to get tied to your bags for sure. So I kind of had to learn the hard way. I wish I would have just started with Bitcoin, or I wish I would have gotten in years ago, so I would have known, you know, not to mess around with any of these ICOs anyway. But you live and learn. It's a good lesson.
So have you invested into any ICOs?
Nope, no ICOs for me.
And are you completely against altcoins altogether, or are there any that you like at all?
Not really. I mean, I it's hard because on one hand, you know, you want everybody to be able to do their own thing. You want to print your own money, go for it. Right. Who am I to stop you? The only issue I have with it is that it's could be potentially slowing down the adoption of global sound money, which is the goal here. That's why everybody's here, even if they're saying, you know, I'm here. Oh, it's a different use case, or it's really specific to that. It's not. Everyone's trying to become money. That's the ultimate goal. And once you do enough research, you kind of start to say, okay, well, if that's the goal, that's the use case that, you know, Bitcoin's blockchain solves, what has the highest probability or most likely outcome to become global money? And then you kind of weigh what that is, and you kind of end up just leaning to Bitcoin because nothing else really has a good shot right now. And that's not to say something else won't come along to dethrone that. And I think if that does happen, it's probably already out and we just don't know about it. It might be circulating somewhere on the web, but I think it's going to be very tough to you know, solve the double spend problem, digital scarcity in a different way. I think proof of work is probably the best way to do it at this point.
So we kind of have this idea in our mind of who this channel should be aimed towards, and we want to try to bring as many beginners onto our channel,
Right.
crypto, as we can. So for people unfamiliar with the term, can you kind of, in layman's terms, describe double spend, if that's even possible?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, the double spend problem, it's easy to explain with a physical example. So let's say I was there in person with you guys and we were doing this this podcast, and I wanted to, I had $20 and you know, I can only buy one thing, but I actually have $20 and give it to one of you, and then take that same $20 and give it to the other person, right? It's not physically possible. I can't double spend a physical, you know, coin or piece of paper.
Mhm.
So solving the double spend problem for digital scarcity essentially ensures that you cannot spend the same coins twice. Once they're sent to another address, that's it. There's no going back. There's no way to copy that same thing, like copy and paste it, that UTXO, and then send it to another address.
And how has proof of work helped in that?
So proof of work is, I guess it would be more for security. So as an example, if I'm sending, I send you one Bitcoin, it's put into the next block. I paid my fee. It's mine. The miner receives that fee that I paid to confirm that transaction, and they you know, reap the block reward potentially. The energy that's spent ensures that that transaction can't be overwritten, right? It becomes more expensive than to rewrite the blockchain.
Basically, keeping people honest.
All proof of work does is make it very, very expensive to attempt to change the blockchain and rewrite it. It's very, very expensive to do that. That's the reason why proof of work is so important.
Yeah, and to be honest, out of all the consensuses that there are right now, it's definitely the best. Like, I'm not really convinced that proof of stake is the way to go. Proof of work right now is definitely the best consensus. I have to agree with that. As far as Bitcoin is concerned, do you think that it can rival the financial systems that are in place today?
That's a tough question. I think, you know, within the next 2 decades, you'll see the entire financial system either be completely absorbed into BTC. So, you know, all the instruments that they're using will just sit on top of that, or it will run congruently next to each other. I have no idea. I couldn't speculate that, but I think I saw on Twitter today someone mentioned that they think, you know, within the next 10 years, all securities are going to be tokenized. Well, that's interesting. And I guess that could happen. I guess you could say, well, how much different is that than me trading on Robinhood or E-Trade? You know, I have no idea whether the Square stock I'm buying is legitimate or not. You know, I don't receive the piece of paper telling me I'm you know, the holder of that equity in particular. So if it were tokenized, we probably wouldn't even know the difference because it would be running in the background. And you know, if it were to be tokenized, would it sit on top of Bitcoin? You know, I have no clue. have no clue. But I have a feeling in 20 years nobody's going to know if anything was tokenized anyway, because it's going to work like magic. That's why software is so cool, because it just works.
So when it comes to cryptocurrencies, do you believe that any of them are decentralized apart from Bitcoin?
I doubt it. I don't think so. With Ethereum, you have issues with node centralization. You have Infura running a lot of pretty much any node on the network, full node. They're running, and then you have, it's debatable whether or not Vitalik is a central point of failure. I mean, at this point, I don't really care anymore. It doesn't really matter. And then, yeah, like it'll work itself out naturally. And then, people are trying to do weird stuff with on-chain governance and voting. I mean, we know today that voting doesn't work. We have voter fraud all the time, constantly. It never works. If voting worked, they wouldn't allow you to vote. So, like, yeah, exactly. So it's just, I think it would be just really difficult to decentralize another network. And if you have the chance, if anybody out there wants to jump down the decentralized rabbit hole, Eric Voskuil has a really good YouTube video and good commentary on his LaBitcoin library that just goes over a lot of the cryptocurrency fallacies. And he talks a lot about decentralization there. It's a good read for everybody.
So is that on YouTube, what you just mentioned?
His the video that I was mentioning, I think, is day 2 of the Baltic Honey Badger conference. He was the very first speaker. I think it's at like 30 minutes or something into the video, but he goes over the reserve currency fallacy, and within that he talks a lot about decentralization and how basically Bitcoin's just black market pretty much, and you're always going to be able to all it is the miners it's miners and merchants, right? So merchants hire miners to confirm transactions. That's it. They're not against each other. They're not adversaries. Merchants hire miners to confirm transactions. That's it. So, when they say, oh, the government's going to ban it, which they can do and have done before, or they want to try to attack. So the government decides, all right, I'm going to buy a couple thousand ASICs and try to 51% attack the network. And then they can effectively censor your transaction, right? But in order to avoid that, you just keep paying a higher fee and a higher fee and a higher fee. And someone's going to mine your transaction and validate it so that it goes through. And, it just starts all over again. And the only way that works is if you have nodes and miners all around the world, right? So you can look at the node decentralization is getting better. Miner centralization, that's debatable, right? You have Bitmain in China and, heavily subsidized electricity costs. That's not really free market in that case, but, you have new miners setting up shop in Washington State where they can get good cheap electricity. Same thing in New York State. So I think Bitcoin is being decentralized over time. It's definitely not perfectly decentralized. I don't think I would be lying if I said that it was, but I think it's in the process of becoming much more decentralized, especially as we get that full node count up.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of the debates I have with people where they're telling me about some shitcoin that has crazy fast transactions, and I'm telling them how it's centralized, and their only response is, well, Bitcoin's centralized because of the miners. They're all in China.
Right.
And I understand mining centralization. You could say that there is mining centralization with Bitcoin, but overall, it's the most decentralized cryptocurrency out there.
Right. I mean, you got to decide what metric are you using to determine how decentralized something is. Is it by the node count and where they're located on the planet? I mean, I guess, is it, by miners? Is it by how many different contributors are contributing to the open source software, right? So, Bitcoin has the most contributors that are, and they're different all the time for every single release. They're different people. It's not all Blockstream coding up the whole thing. It's not the way it's happening. You're having completely anonymous people going in and submitting pull requests, and they're getting merged. So it's really nice to see that it's definitely a true open source project.
Yeah. What do you think of what's going on right now with Craig Wright and Roger Ver and Jihan? This whole stupid fucking Bitcoin, whatever they want to call it now, hash war. What's your views on that?
I don't know, man. I've been trying to not read too much into it because I know it's going to be a waste of time me researching what these scammers are up to. But I don't know, man. I think fake Toshi is trying to make a move on Jihan for sure. Or this is all premeditated and planned, and they just tricked a bunch of a couple thousand people into buying another token, and it worked perfectly in that case. So yeah, it's tough. I hate being mean about it, but it's like, the people are going to fall for scams all the time. And, that's exactly what this is. And it's working perfectly. And that's a shame. So it's one reason why I am anti-ICO, because it kind of gets us away from, the goal. But it is what it is. You gotta let things play out.
Yeah, man.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same side as you. I've never believed in Bitcoin Cash. I have many arguments with people because of this. I think it's a bit of a facade. I'm not sure whether there really is some, like, Craig Wright and Jihan are actually against each other, or if they're colluding together just to scam people. I really don't know. I haven't done enough research. I really don't care to either.
Right.
But I do think it is playing a big part in hurting the market right now. Even though we were looking at hitting these price points anyway, but I think it sped the process up, which might even be a good thing, just to fucking bottom out and then reverse.
Well, the last time they forked Bitcoin, they attacked Bitcoin, right? Like, that was the whole thing with Bitcoin Cash, was to attack Bitcoin. So I don't know if these guys have really just been, colluding, and they're in cahoots with each other to attack Bitcoin again on the scope that they're attacking each other. I don't know if you kind of have that kind of mentality, but the coin that's suffering the most right now is Bitcoin, because it's just continually dropping over the last 2 weeks in price. Ever since this hash war started between ABC and SV, I mean, Bitcoin has suffered the most. So it's making me think, like, ABC and SV, what the heck are they, and why is Bitcoin suffering because of it? So maybe that was their plan all along. I really don't know. I don't think they have enough to, do enough damage to Bitcoin to do anything, worthwhile. I think it's just another, speed bump on the road. It's not going to halt it. For sure. Yeah. I mean, speaking of that, can Bitcoin die, in your opinion? Can it ever be stopped?
I don't think so. I don't. If someone was going to kill it, it would have had to have already happened. Now the hash rate's just too high. It's way too expensive to kill the network. I don't think it would ever go to zero. BitConnect is not at zero. So that's a perfect example why I don't think Bitcoin won't go to zero. But, there's I guess I have a couple of thoughts. One would be, Trace Mayer always talks about the hodlers of last resort, and Pierre Rochard just wrote a nice piece on, the buyers of last resort and the hodlers of last resort, that they're out there. I'm one of them. When Bitcoin keeps dropping, I am still buying, and I buy every week, all the time. It's nice for me. It's easy. It's convenient. I don't think about it. I never have to worry about that. And, that is one of the groups of people who are those buyers of last resort. They're always buying, on that monthly, weekly basis. And it's hard to say because, if Bitcoin drops to $1,000, I'm buying. If Bitcoin drops to 2,000, I'm buying. If it drops to 500, I'm buying. And, I'm sure you would too. Once you kind of swallow the pill, you know what kind of value the potential that it has. So you don't just, let it die. But it just depends if people are going to fold or not. The only way Bitcoin dies is if people really stop believing. And the only way people stop believing is if it stops confirming transactions, or well, the first thing would be if the coin cap is ever changed, right? If it's no longer 21 million, then it's game over for sure. I wouldn't want to be a part of Bitcoin after that. So I would get rid of everything and wait for the next thing that's attempting to be global sound money after that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm one of the hodlers. One of the guys that will be buying no matter how low it goes. Because for me, it's a long-term thing, and I tell everyone that
Right.
asks me, "Should I invest?" I'm like, "Well, are you investing long-term?" Or they'll ask me, "When should I invest?" And I'll say, "Well, if you're looking at this as a long-term investment, then yesterday was the right time to buy Bitcoin."
Exactly.
I'm not one of those guys that thinks it's like this is a get rich quick scheme. Like I'm in it for the long run. So yeah, I'm of the same belief as you when it comes to Bitcoin for sure.
Yeah, Bitcoin is it's just dressed up as a get rich quick scheme, and if you're willing to wait, a decade or so, I have no doubts that you'll definitely see some gains for sure, for sure.
Definitely.
What do you say to people that, because we just recently did a video about Ripple and we've gotten some negative feedback about it.
As you would, right? The fanboys hate it when you start talking bad about
I'm
it.
sure. I'm sure.
What do you think? What are your thoughts on Ripple, and can they do what they're set out to do?
I mean, I guess I don't see. It doesn't not work. It's just a database, though. There's nothing really that special about it. Um, it's the exact opposite of Bitcoin. And I didn't really, that didn't make sense until I had watched that video that I had mentioned of Eric Voskuil talking about the reserve currency fallacy. And pretty much you realize that Bitcoin's design, proof of work, the security model, is really just to make sure that the government can't have a monopoly on money. That's it. That's exactly why it's designed. And then you have another coin that's use cases to specifically work with bankers, possibly central banks, which is that's not what I want to work on. That's not very interesting to me. If banks wanted to do that right now, they could fork Ripple's code. It's open source. They could make it however many billions of tokens they want, and that's it. Nobody needs XRP anymore. But that's not to say that people will not mistake XRP for security, because I think that it is, and shill it and try to pump that shit for sure. I mean, it's if the market that when XRP fanboys DM me, they usually say, oh, the use case is different. It's for interbank settlements, cross-border remittances, blah blah blah. It's a however many $1 trillion market cap. Okay, that's great, but that's still very small. That a remittance is such a small piece of the global fiat pie, which is 70 trillion in physical cash. I think you can double check that, but it's just such a small pie to go after. And if they're saying it's a different use case and both of them work, why would you use XRP when there's another solution available that works much better, in my opinion? But that's not to say I could be totally wrong. XRP takes the #1 spot next year and is money. I don't know. I don't think it's highly probable, but some people do.
Yeah.
But some people that don't understand what you just said. I mean, if you say to someone that's sitting across from you arguing Ripple that Bitcoin is the opposite of Ripple and Ripple is the opposite of Bitcoin, they don't understand that. They don't understand what that means.
Right. And it's at some point, I have a lot of followers of mine that they love XRP, and that's great. That's cool. I'm glad that either got them into crypto or is at least keeping them here, right? It's keeping them in the game. So I can thank Brad Garlinghouse and the good folks over at Ripple for that. And I hope that they look to Bitcoin in the near future.
Yep, agree with you. So, as a Bitcoin maximalist, who are some people that you follow? Whether it be, you can drop a couple of names here, whether it be YouTube, Twitter, just um, just those people that you mentioned that are coming. Maybe they got into ETH or Ripple and they want to start exploring Bitcoin. Who should they look to?
For sure. I would check out, if you don't have a Twitter account, sign up. Even if you aren't going to engage with anybody, it's worth it just to sign up for the information. I would recommend a couple of podcasts. The first would be the Noted podcast with Pierre Rochard and Michael Goldstein. That's fantastic. Start all the way from the beginning and listen all the way up to, I think it's episode 33 or 34 by now. The Stephan Laverra podcast is awesome. He is a great Bitcoin maximalist, really knowledgeable on Austrian economics. He the guy's super smart. It's definitely go back, listen to all of his podcasts. He has a lot of really good guests, and he prepares for his interviews, which I should probably learn to do too. Who else? I would the Trace Mayer, the Bitcoin Knowledge podcast for sure. Read the Bitcoin Standard or listen to it if you have not done that yet. Pick up Safe Dean's book. Or he just tweeted actually today where you could find a pirated copy because he doesn't believe in intellectual property rights, which I agree with. So you can get it for free if you choose to do that. Also check out Tales from the Crypt, Marty Bent podcast, really good stuff. He has a lot of really good interviews. Who else? What Bitcoin Did is also another good podcast to listen to. A lot of really good guests on there. But that would be the first step. And also check out the Mises Institute for a lot of background stuff on Austrian economics. And Jameson Lopp has a really good website that covers a lot of basically FAQs on Bitcoin. You can Google Jameson Lopp and you'll find his link there as well.
Okay, so we should mention at this point, all of these links that CH mentioned are going to be on the description below. We're going to go ahead and do some link hunting as well and put those in there, and so that our fans can kind of see what else is out there and start going down that rabbit hole with you guys. So
yeah, so I look at the top 10 cryptocurrencies and I'm just like, I'm like, why the fuck are these even in here for the most, right?
Yeah.
So if you used to pick one out of the top 10 that you think is the biggest shitcoin, what would it be?
Let me look at the top 10. Let me see. If Tron's in the top 10, I guess Tron. XRP's too, and I think that's a big shitcoin. So, but that's not a fair answer. Let me see. It depends on how you want to define shitcoin. Because, Bitcoin Cash is pretending to be Bitcoin. That's a shitcoin. Yeah. EOS is trash. Litecoin's pretending to be money. They're never going to be money.
Oh, that's so talk to us about that. Because I thought Bitcoin maximalists like Litecoin.
Not always true. And so pretty much, Bitcoin maximalism is really just coming to an investment conclusion that only one thing can be money, because that's money's definition, is to, be something that's very liquid that makes economic transactions very easy to do, right? So it's really a lot easier if it's just one thing. When the globe was operating on a gold standard, each currency was valued in however many grams or ounces of gold was equivalent to a single unit. So it was really easy for banks to move money cross border. It wasn't an issue. Everybody knew what the exchange rate was. There was no reason that it fluctuated. The FX market didn't even exist yet. And now we have multiple monies, so we've went backwards to barter, which is never good. With monies, it's just a technology. All it is a piece of technology that allows you to measure value and give that to somebody else. It's been seashells, it's been gold, it's been silver, it's been a bunch of different things, and each one of those is really just a different technology that is money. So once you've come to the conclusion that, you know, money can only be one thing, you realize why gold failed, right? So gold lost to fiat. We're not going to go back to a gold standard because it lost already to fiat, you know, that by design. Gold didn't work because it, you know, it wasn't a good enough money. It wasn't secure enough, right? So you couldn't have fractions of gold to pay for very small things, right? So that's why coinage existed, right? And then with coinage, you could validate, right? Somebody would mint it. They'd put a stamp on it and say, this coin is valid. But it didn't work because guess what? They confiscated everybody's gold. They put it in one place and then they inflated the supply, right? So that's a security weakness in gold. It's not a good money because it will always inevitably lead to fiat, and then fiat will win. So when you think about Charlie Lee's argument of the silver to Bitcoin's gold, I guess if you know, if they were physical things, I might see why. But in this case, you know, Bitcoin's highly divisible, 100 million Satoshis in each one. Once you start getting high enough up in price, you know, one Satoshi becomes that new unit of account, right? And I think I'm pushing for Satoshis. I'm on Team Satoshi, so I think we should start measuring stuff in Satoshis if possible.
Agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's it. Yeah, it's not cultish. It's not anything like that. And it's the same thing with eating only meat, right? So you think I had multiple people tell me don't eat only meat because it's very bad for you, and I asked them why, and they didn't have any good answers besides their doctor told them that it wasn't good for them. And then you jump down the whole, you know, meat rabbit hole and realize, you know, high cholesterol will not kill you. Eating meat doesn't clog your arteries. So you start to, you know, take these red pills and realize, wow, I've been told, you know, to take it easy on the meat because it's bad for me. And then you realize it's the exact opposite, that you can live only on meat. And Bitcoin's very similar. You realize all the issues that money had over time, right? You start to understand how a commodity becomes money, right? It moves through a collectible, it moves through a store of value, a medium of exchange, and then finally a unit of account, right? And it moves along those things. And it's funny because you see something like Bcash pushing for the medium of exchange part first, then store of value. They think, you know, if people are transacting using it as a medium of exchange, it then becomes a store of value. But it's actually the opposite way around. So something's going to become a store of value first, and only because it has that utility of storing value would you feel comfortable about using it as a medium of exchange. So that's just like a common error. It's very believable though, because, you know, Roger Ver could come on your show and say, listen, you have to Bitcoin needs to be used. That's the whole point. It's supposed to be zero transaction fee and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And it sounds really good, right? It sounds like, yeah, you're right, man. Everybody should just be using this. I don't understand. And then, you know, you learn better and realize how money works, and it starts to make more sense. So it's a bet at this point. It's a bet that if something's going to become global money, it will most likely be Bitcoin at this point.
So you said that it has to be a store of value first. Can you give us an example of that? Like you kind of talked about gold and stuff like that. Was gold the store of value first, and then it became an exchange?
For sure. You know, people were storing their wealth in gold for millennia, right? And it only really became a medium of exchange once it was socially accepted as a store of value, right? My grandfather gave me a gold coin when I was very little, and he got that from his father. So, you know, it's been passed down. So you see that, you know, his father stored a piece of wealth in this gold coin and then passed it along down the generations, right? So people had trust in that. And, you know, once they financialized gold, I mean, it's worth what, $1,200 an ounce now. But it was much, much lower in the previous decades. Mm-hmm. So people really, you know, and a lot of high net worth individuals store well, probably not a significant portion, but they do store a portion of their wealth in gold. And I have a feeling that those high net worth individuals of the future, right, of a younger generation who grew up in a digital world, might see that, because in my opinion now, Bitcoin's a very conservative investment because I'm not going to spend it for another decade. And it's something that I can see, all right, well, I can store my wealth in this through time. I can pass this along, and I know nobody can really take it from me, right? Because I'm holding my private keys. And you could do the same thing with gold. Except with gold, if you have a shitload of it, it's really expensive to secure it. Where are you going to keep that? And that's one of the security flaws of gold, unfortunately, because it was a really good money for thousands of years.
Yeah, that's the issue. Like, first of all, you're gonna need a safe bolted into the floor to store it. It's not very practical. And then when you do want to spend it, what you're gonna do? You're gonna go to your local cash for gold and get a shit price for it. Like, it's very hard to sell gold and get like spot price.
Right.
Where the difference with Bitcoin, it's very easy to store. You put it on your Trezor or your Ledger wallet, and it's very easy to spend. So,
and it's easy to transport too. Like, I mean, I just think about the example of like people leave, like mass exodus happening in Venezuela right now. Things like that have happened in my country, where in Turkey, when the coup happened, there was an embargo on Turkey, and basically Turkey couldn't buy wheat and they couldn't make bread, and all this kind of stuff. And people started leaving Turkey, and people that were leaving had cash on them. Well, when they got to the airport, police stopped them and said, we got to do a search here. And then they just took the cash and the gold and whatever else. And obviously it goes unreported, and you can't really say who you're going to report to when the police are taking the food, right? But if you happen to have your private key memorized, then maybe you're okay.
Right. A brain wallet, literally. Yeah, I mean, I saw a couple of weeks ago, some guy his mother passed away, and he flew, to take care of the funeral and such, and he was left with $50,000 from inheritance. Flew back with it, and they seized it at the airport. They seized it at TSA. That sucks. And there's nothing, like, you're never getting that money back. That's it. It's done. It's going to cost you $50,000 in lawyer fees to try to get that money back. And you can keep your hardware wallet in your backpack. You can memorize the private seed. You can fly and move digital money anywhere. And nobody's really going to know the difference. And it'll take a couple more years for TSA to start realizing what hardware wallets look like and stuff like that. So I think that window of being able to fly with your hardware wallet is coming to a close in the next decade. But who knows? Maybe not. I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's always paper wallets, right?
Oh yeah, if you want to use a paper wallet, fold that shit up, put it in your wallet. I mean, that's it. That's it.
There's many
scary though. Super scary.
It is scary. But I mean, the example you just gave, $50,000 was taken from a man for why? What?
Right.
You know what I mean?
The law
exactly.
Can't travel with more than $10,000 or something.
Yeah, because
I think it's 10,000. Yeah, and even 10,000, they're going to ask you why you have $10,000 in cash on you. They're not going to ask you. So unless they don't find it, but it's kind of hard to hide $10,000 in cash. But it's very easy to hide a 24-word recovery seed, either in your mind or on a piece of paper going with you somewhere. So it blows my mind.
Well, here's where it gets into, terrorists can do it, right? Well, terrorists can move more easily now because of it. And I'm just thinking, like, well, terrorists have been moving money around pretty easily. Like HSBC didn't get audited and found out that, like,
correct,
a bunch of wars and stuff like that. Like, I mean, it's not like it's on.
So no, for sure. I mean, the terrorists' money of choice to use to launder is the US dollar, and their preferred launderer of choice is HSBC or any bank, really, because they all do it for them on a daily basis. That's how it operates, right? That's why it's very profitable to launder money, right? That's why banks do it. It's a risk reward. That's all it is. It's just an economic calculation, regardless of if it's illegal or not. because, whatever, it's a free market. People should be able to just do whatever they want to do. But I have a feeling terrorists are going to keep using the US dollar until it's either not around anymore, or they're just going to use Bitcoin. And yeah, it's another common, FUD thing. Bitcoin's great. It's going to help everyone, whether they're a good person or a bad person. It's going to provide a lot of economic freedom. So for instance, if somebody wanted to put embargoes on Turkey or whatever, or, they want to remove them from SWIFT, right? And you can't participate any longer in the global financial system. There's no SWIFT police to go say, hey, let me back in. They're just going to opt out, and they're going to pick a different currency that nobody controls. If that's Bitcoin, that's great. You can say it's not good because of maybe North Korea, which they're probably mining right now. Same thing in Venezuela. I'm sure Maduro is stacking Satoshis as we speak. But, Murad, Mustat Murad on Twitter, follow him and listen to his, look, he's done a couple of podcasts. He's awesome. And he made a good point that the people who need uncensorable money the most need Bitcoin the most, right? And the people who need to hide money the most will use Bitcoin the most. So you have these two, you have Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, whatever. The leaders of those countries will turn to Bitcoin soon as in, 5 years or so, or they're mining now, and that's a part of their long game. But for sure, I mean, you start cutting people out of the global financial system, and they will adapt for sure. They will not let their country die.
Yeah, one of the things that really sparked my interest in Bitcoin was that it was censorship resistant. That was like aha moment for me. And when I first realized that was in 2011, when WikiLeaks, when they put the banking ban on WikiLeaks and everyone cut them off, and they decided to
shut down their PayPal.
Yeah, they shut down PayPal, MasterCard, Visa. And back then I was very into WikiLeaks. I used to follow them closely. I remember at work, in my spare time, I'd be on there just reading through all these documents.
Yeah.
And when I saw that they put a page up saying we're now accepting donations in Bitcoin, and that's when I actually realized for the first time that the governments and the banks can't stop this. They can't stop people transacting in this currency. And that was huge for me. I still didn't invest back then. I wish I did, but I was, wow, like this is revolutionary. This has never existed before. So yeah, that's a big thing for me. Censorship resistance is like huge. Like, yeah, I mean, it works for the bad guys and it works for the good guys, but that's just the nature of the beast, right?
Right. The playing field's totally equal, and the bad guys are using the US dollar today a lot. I mean, that's all that they use pretty much. So it's no different than what we have today. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because I knew I knew Bitcoin was going to work when it was, I don't know, the bull market was happening, and I went to to send a wire to the exchange, and it was a Friday at lunch, and they told me, oh, sure, no problem. It's going to get there on Monday. And I was like, what do you mean it's going to get there on Monday? It's Friday. It's a wire. It's supposed to go through right now. And it was after lunch, and they're like, yeah, man, it's tough. After, noon, 1 o'clock, this wire's not going to settle. And it didn't settle until the following Tuesday because it was a holiday on Monday. Right. So you can miss out on an entire 40% dip. I mean, you can really get screwed sending a wire to the exchange. And then you realize, but it's my money. Like, why can't I send my money wherever I want at any time, 24 hours a day, 365? And you send that first Bitcoin transaction after banking hours on a weekend, and you're like, holy shit, because you grew up in a time when you could only send money around with, paper checks or a wire transfer that costs $30 or, whatever. Now we have Venmo and all their stuff, and it's different, but I couldn't send my money in my bank account to another account of mine on an exchange. Couldn't do it. Wasn't allowed to do it.
Well, I mean,
had to wait a couple of days.
To an ATM machine, and it charges you like nearly $4 to take out $20. It's like, I thought this was my money, but thank you for charging me my money to get my money. You know what I mean? Like,
it's wild.
Even something like, but I mean, I've had I've had situations where people sending a wire transfer internationally, like, you know, my money is coming to,
Right.
and it takes 3 to 4 business days. Sometimes the bank will call, and sometimes, you know, things go
Yep.
haywire.
That's right.
Yeah, I had a situation recently where my friend in London, England, that's where I grew up, was sending me like $3,000, and Bank of America stopped the transaction, asked him a bunch of questions about me, who I was, why he's sending me the money, and in the end, sent the money back to him and said, we're not sending it to him. So I was just like, I told him beforehand, just send me Bitcoin, but he was like, oh, but I've got to buy it. I was like, all right, just send me the money then.
Yeah.
But then he had to buy Bitcoin and send it to me. And I was just like,
Right.
no longer will I ever ask anyone that has to send me money internationally to send me fiat. Like, go and buy Bitcoin and send it to me.
Right. Right. And that's a perfect example, because that's the cross-border use case that, you know, we're talking about, right? And that works so well. So well. If you have friends or family or relatives in another country, what are you going to use? Western Union for like a 30% fee, or, you know what I mean? Or, and it's going to take forever, or send a wire transfer that might not go through. It just doesn't make any sense anymore. It's just not that user friendly right now, which is okay. Which is okay. I mean, it takes 20 years for technology to be adopted. You know, we're halfway there. We're at year 10, I guess. So once we hit the tipping point, it's just going to get a lot easier. You're going to be able to use a remote node from your phone. I mean, it'll be just like using Venmo or the Cash App. You know what I mean? It's going to be exactly like that. Super easy to use.
So what is your price prediction, short term and long term, for Bitcoin?
That's a tough question. It's my least favorite question, but it's everybody's, favorite question to ask for sure. Short term, I have no idea. I really don't. I don't know where the bottom is. You'd like to think it's around 3,000. Depending upon when somebody's watching this, they're going to know whether or not I was right or wrong. It's November 27th, 2018. So check this in a little while and you can let me know that I was right or wrong. Probably wrong. Could be down to 1,000. Who knows? But in the long term, after reading a lot of the stuff from Mustat Murad, follow him on Twitter, and listening to his last podcast with Pomp, Pomp asked him this question, and I have to say I'm definitely in agreement with his price prediction with a market cap between 100 trillion and 200 trillion, and then he backed it down to roughly 160 trillion. And we can talk about how he got to that number, but that rounds out to a Bitcoin price in today's dollars of around 10 million a Bitcoin. And that could take decades. I don't know. I want to say he said by 2037, 2040, around that time frame. I guess it's possible. Who knows? We won't know until we get there. And we won't know if that's a true measurement, because if it does get there, I have a feeling we'll have severe hyperinflation in the United States. So, that could skew that figure, but he got there pretty easily. You take the total market cap of gold, right? And that puts you at 8 trillion. And that's a price of around $300,000 per coin. And then you start to take physical money and you say, okay, where do people store their value? Where do they store their wealth? And, you could make the argument that, a lot of people actually store their wealth in physical cash, right? In the bank. They keep it in gold. So that's when you get to that, $8 trillion mark. Then you take, okay, what if Bitcoin absorbs all of fiat, which is another 100 trillion on top of that? And then it gets interesting when you talk about real estate, because real estate, I think it's a $200 trillion market cap. And a lot of people store their wealth in real estate. You have the Chinese buying huge buildings in San Francisco. They're storing their wealth in that. It's an investment for them to store their wealth through time, buying real estate in the United States of America, in one of the most populated cities on the planet. It makes a lot of sense. And I think if someone had the opportunity to store their wealth in money and something easier to store it in, something that naturally appreciates over time, you start to ask that question of, okay, well, how much of the current investment in real estate is actually just someone storing their wealth in real estate? And if they could choose to store it somewhere else, maybe Bitcoin, what percentage of 200 trillion is actually that? And that's a question I've been thinking about a lot. You know, what is the total market cap of a store of value? And that depends on how you define a store of value. Is it all physical cash? Is it only gold? Maybe it's only 8 trillion, right? Maybe we only get to $300,000 of Bitcoin, and it never becomes a medium of exchange. It's never a unit of account. It's just another thing that a bunch of millennials want to store their value and their wealth in. That's fine. That will also work. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think once you get to store value, it's just going to keep going and move its way on to medium of exchange. But figuring out what the total market cap in today's dollars of what the real store of value is the tricky part. I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I've listened to that podcast. I think it's my favorite podcast.
It's my favorite one too. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the good podcast. I sent that to all my friends on there.
Yeah.
Listen to this.
Yeah, I sent it to everybody. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's you know, and
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's a really good point that he made in the podcast, and what you just mentioned about, it's not just, you can't just look at it as the market cap of gold, because there's so many other things that people store their value in, like real estate. And when you start looking into that and you realize, wow, like that, there's a lot of money stored in real estate, right? So when you start taking into considerations other store of values and how some of that money, or maybe all of it, could transfer into Bitcoin, and you look at the numbers, you're just like, holy shit, this is crazy.
Yeah, it gets mind-bogglingly big. And and it's funny because Pomp, you know, he said that to Murad. He said, you realize you're one of the only people who believes, you know, that Bitcoin could be worth $10 million a coin in today's dollars. And he was like, yeah, it sounds really, really crazy. It probably sounds just as crazy as somebody telling me XRP is going to go to 100. And, you know, like, I get it. It sounds really wild. But when you back into the use case of global money and then start to figure out what the economic equivalent of what that could be is, you know, cross-border remittances, who gives a shit? I want to know what the market cap of global money is going to be. And that's the goal, right? It's not some one-off use case for whatever, you know? So the numbers get really large, and that's where you start to look a little crazy. You know, the maximalist viewpoint gets a little wacky for sure.
Well, I mean, you know what? Anyone would have called you crazy if you told them something that they could buy in 2009 at less than 1 cent is going to be $20,000 9 years later, right? I mean, to them, you would have sounded crazy, straight up, out of this world nut job. Get out of my face, get out of my office. But I mean, that really happened. So, I mean, I don't know if it's going to go to 100 million. I mean, it's just the idea of sound money is really interesting. It's just really interesting. It really makes me think about all the shit that, like, you know, look, man, I'm Turkish. I see what's going on over there. I know a couple of months ago, my relatives, my family over there went to sleep one night and woke up the next day, and then the lira went down 15%, right? I mean, that is supposed to be, you know, 80 million people use that money in Turkey. 120 million across the world have some sort of attachment to Turkish lira, and it was gone. Yeah. Like 15% of it. I mean, that's it. I mean, I know Bitcoin, you could tell me, well, it's calmed down 30%, 40%. Yeah, it has. Right. That's not 80 million people that are forced to use that money. They're supposed to be, the smartest minds in Turkey should be working on ensuring that that doesn't happen. And this has happened to the country so many times. Like, it's like we don't learn.
Yeah. I mean, the same things. Yeah, it's happened in Argentina. They've repegged multiple times. I mean, I was just there this year, and you know, they were suffering from inflation. You know, I was checking the peso to the dollar months before, and leading up to it. And it really, I mean, it lost, I think, at least 10% of its value. But that's crazy. That's crazy. And you don't think about it, you know, you can say, oh, well, when I was growing up, the movies were, well, some people will tell you it was like a quarter to go to the movies, and then it was $5. You talk to somebody a generation younger, and now it's what, like 12 or 15 for us. And, you know, it sounds normal because inflation just happens. You don't realize that what you store your wealth in is being inflated, right? Outside of your control. And then stuff just gets more expensive and it doesn't make sense. And it's funny because that always never made sense to me as a kid. Yeah.
When everything
What's
is
that?
expensive, your pay is not getting to be more unless you're, you know, really good at
right.
working longer. And now you have this debt. You got to pay your mortgage, so you're working even longer, and you're picking up a second job. But all of that is out of your control because the money went up.
Yep.
That's why the whole idea of
right. Yeah, and it's funny because you're not really sure what happens if we have a global sound money, because it's kind of scary because, you know, fiat money has kind of gotten us to where we are right now, and money touches everything. And people's incentives change. You know, Bitcoin changes you. That's what's so weird about it. I think twice now about getting guacamole at Chipotle because, you know, that $2 now could be worth a couple hundred or thousand in the future. And, you know, you start to think like, all right, well, do I need to, you know, I think within the next decade or so, we're going to be done with, you know, the disposable items, like getting a new phone every year, you know, buying something to just throw it away. Anything disposable within reason isn't going to make sense anymore. You know, people aren't going to buy crappy stuff because that was created by fiat, right? The only way to fund that is when your money's becoming worth less and less every year. There's no point in holding it. You might as well just spend it. And it creates a ton of malinvestment. You know, if the government has no control over the money supply, they can't fund things like war. They can't do a lot of stuff that we're used to seeing day in and day out. And, you know, you won't see any stupid venture capitalist ideas anymore because they're not going to piss their money away. When you're forced to give up Bitcoin, you really think twice about, is whatever I'm investing in or spending this Bitcoin on really worth it? And you don't know how anyone's going to operate on a sound money standard. You know, when it was a gold standard, there was very little war. I mean, you wouldn't think twice about sponsoring a government program or subsidizing something because it doesn't make any sense. And that could come back, which will be a struggle for some people for sure. But I mean, you can't stop it. It's just going to happen, and there's nothing you can do about it, unfortunately.
I mean, depends how you look at it. You say unfortunately, but I mean, is taking, like, consumerism is killing a lot of people. Like, it's just, you're never good enough.
It's the worst.
You're never good enough, right? Your car is the latest this year. It's not going to be the latest next year. And your neighbor is going to the limited edition of your car, and you don't have the limited edition. So now your car is not good enough. You're never good enough. That's what you're taught through consumerism and advertising, and people just always jump down the throat because they know that you have to spend money.
Right. Yeah, people are just going to stop spending frivolously. I mean, they're just not going to do it. And that's where Bitcoin changes you, because you really start to think different. You question every single dollar that goes out, right? So right now, the only things I spend money on are Bitcoin, beef, and rent. Other than that, I try to keep my spending to zero, right? Because what else do I really need? You know, I have all the clothes I need. I can get to and from work. I'm good. You know, I got my gym membership paid for. That's good. I can buy, you know, some skirt steak or ground beef. That'll get me through the week. I'm good. I don't need to, you know, get a $5 latte every day to make myself feel better, or, you know, have a really dope suit to wear like once, you know, downtown. It's just, you just really start thinking differently and questioning every single dollar. And people are not going to like that, especially in the US. They are not going to be happy with that. because they've been ingrained to just spend as much as possible, and even take out loans that you can't afford and spend.
Yeah.
So
yeah, man, it's funny when you think about the people that have bought things with Bitcoin and how they feel right now. Like, for example, if they were buying stuff with their Bitcoin 2-3 years ago, they're kicking themselves right now. It's fucking crazy. Like,
well, the famous one, the most famous transaction Bitcoin has
pizzas,
ever had, the 2 pizzas, 10,000.
The only thing I've ever purchased with Bitcoin were Bitcoin miners, and I purchased them in December of last year when Bitcoin was peaking. So I made the right move there. But if I had bought them at the beginning of the year, I would have made more money just holding my coin than actually mining the coin.
Exactly. And that's where, and you see a lot of venture capital in this space trying to figure out, because the benchmark should be Bitcoin, right? You need to outperform Bitcoin now, because that's going to be the best performing asset in the next decade or two, as it just was in the last decade, contrary to popular belief. So when you start thinking about that, you say, okay, well, where's the best investment? You need to have returns better than Bitcoin, which is really tough. So I don't really know how anybody's going to do that. So it's really tough when you say, okay, well, I'm going to spend Bitcoin on a full mining rig setup. I'm going to get a dozen ASICs, put them in the shed. I'm going to throw solar panels on the roof, blah, 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 blah. You might not make all the Bitcoin back that you spent. So you need to either live with that and say, okay, you know what, it's fine because it's a hobby, it's going to be fun, and I'm going to mine clean Bitcoin, right? I'm going to get to keep that. I won't have any KYC attached to it. But maybe you want to do that. That might be a good idea to some people if they can afford it, or they don't give a shit about spending a couple Bitcoin on mining hardware. It is what it is. But you hear about Laszlo, 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 pizzas, and it, you cringe, but we have to thank Laszlo for being the first recorded transaction for something. That was the first time it was used as a medium of exchange, pretty much. 10,000 Bitcoins for two pizzas. So we thank Laszlo for his sacrifice.
Yes, we do. I'm like I said, I'm sure he's doing fine anyway. Like, he was in there early enough using it as a medium of exchange. He probably didn't go too far.
Yeah, I'm sure Laszlo's good for sure.
Okay, I think we should wrap it up.
Yeah, I don't want to hold you too much longer. We kind of held you over the hour anyway. So where can everyone find you on social? We know CryptoHumor, obviously we'll have a link on Instagram. Do you also have Twitter or anything else?
Yep. Yeah, you can check me out on Twitter also. I don't post very often or comment very often, but I am on there all the time. So feel free to send me stuff, or send me a tweet or tag me in a tweet that you think is interesting. I'll take a look at it. But yeah, follow the page. I guess at this point I might as well plug it. We recorded the first episode of the Beef and Bitcoin podcast, so I got to work through all the editing on that, and I'll try to launch that within the next week or two. So, you guys can check that out once it's live. But yeah, hit me up on Instagram, DM me if you guys have any questions, want to talk Bitcoin, shit coins, need help with wallets, whatever. I'm here.
Right,
amazing, man. Thanks for having, thank you for coming on to the show.
Yeah, man. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you coming on. I think you've taught me some stuff, so I'm sure you've taught our listeners some stuff. We'll put all the links that you mentioned in the description. We'll obviously put your social on there as well, and have people check out your podcast as well. So thank you so much. Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot, guys. I'm sure we'll be talking again. All right. Cheers, man. Thanks. Bye. Cheers.
Thank you guys for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed. We're going to be getting a lot more influencers like CryptoHumor on the show, so keep your eyes peeled. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and smash that thumbs up button.